Christian, this is the Global Digest think tank group. You are our guest today.
Yeah. My name's Christian. I'm an American. I'm from the US, from Texas specifically, but I've lived a long time in Central Europe, and I'm the editor currently for the Platform for Peace and Humanities Mediterranean team, and I edit the quarterly publication titled Challenges in the Mediterranean.
I see.
I would consider myself a generalist in the Mediterranean region, and I know probably a bit more about Central Europe.
I see.
I probably know about the Mediterranean the most about if I could divide the Mediterranean into a couple different regions,
Right.
I probably know the most about the Levant, and so that would include Israel and Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and so that's probably the part of the Mediterranean that I've really focused a lot on. But I know generally a lot about the region as a whole. So I would say there's 3 to 4 big issues currently in the Mediterranean region. Number one would be migration. And number two, I would say, is the humanitarian issues. There are 2 large ones. One, the biggest one in Israel, Palestine currently, and then two, the conflict in Syria. And then the third one, I would say, is democratic backsliding into authoritarianism. And so those would be the 3, 4 big issues currently in the Mediterranean region.
But about migration, I mean, you are American, usually American talk about southern border, Mexico border, and why you are talking again Mediterranean immigrant issue.
It's a tough issue because let's take North Africa, for example, part of the Mediterranean. So conflict and instability in sub-Saharan Africa generates millions of migrants that want to leave sub-Saharan Africa and migrate to usually Europe. And this creates some political problems on the European side of the equation. Of course, there are issues from the countries that they're leaving, like brain drain, and they're losing good people that, they want to work hard, they want to have a better life, they want to build something better than what they have. But on the European side, they have to deal with uh, large amounts of new people entering the country by legal or illegal means. And this can destabilize political coalitions and result in kind of a fracturing of the political system. So we've seen this in Italy, for example, whereas the left-wing parties have a difficult time figuring out what they agree on, and they kind of fight. But the right-wing parties are pretty centered on we want to stop the immigration and we want to have more traditionalist policies and focus on Italy for Italians. So that it becomes a much stronger. Uh, the right-wing coalitions become a lot stronger the more the migration issue goes unchecked. And so it does change the political shape of the European continent as the longer the migration crisis goes on. And so currently what the Europeans are doing is they're trying to work with third-party countries to act as backstops. So for example, like Tunisia and Egypt, they have memorandums of understanding with the governments where the European Union provides money and the trade-off is that they uh, stop the migrants and try to settle them in those third countries. And they've had some success in Egypt and Tunisia. Italian courts struck down a similar um, attempt with Italy and Albania. But it seems to be that's the direction this is heading towards trying to solve this problem on the European end of that crisis.
All right. I don't know, statistic, what uh, the most immigrant, they are African or Arab or which population the most number migrated to Europe? Do you have any idea?
I'm sure it varies by country. I think in Southern Europe, Africa is probably the largest source. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. But in Germany, for example, I would guess that you probably have a lot more immigrants from the Middle East, from Syria. And but in France, I would venture to guess it's probably a mix of Lebanon, Syria, the Levant region, and Africa as well. So France is probably quite mixed. Italy, I understand, is probably heavier in the African immigration side, and same with Spain.
I mean, most immigrants from Africa or Middle East, uh, it's due to the conflict in their hometown,
Mm,
their home country, or just because of poverty?
mm. It's all of the above, and it gets worse with conflict and increased poverty. So, for example, in Burkina Faso, there was recently the military junta, and it's,
Right,
and then Sudan as well. There's a conflict in North and South Sudan, sorry, in North Sudan. And so these conflicts generate waves of migration. And I would say there's a general baseline caused by the poverty that can be amplified by conflict, by maybe food shortages or geopolitical events that destabilize the areas further.
right. So it's an according to human right law, refugee convention. Those you know, people fled their home country
Mhm.
because of conflict, armed conflict, all kind of conflict for their own safety, security. They have to run out of their country. So isn't basically legitimate uh, migration.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not exactly at liberty to answer that, but I can give you probably my best understanding of the situation. So hmm, when you leave your country because you have a fear of maybe persecution or maybe you're afraid that you could be killed, then you definitely have the legal status of a refugee in that situation. And then the first safe country that you arrive to, and this is where a lot of the legal battle is over what is actually
But
a safe country, what's considered a safe country. And to my understanding, we don't have the perfect definition of what a safe country is. And so that's kind of where the gray area is, and that's where it can be manipulated a little bit by countries that maybe don't want to receive as many refugees, and they work with another country saying, "Oh, well, if we can control the flow and get this migration to go through what we would consider a safe country, we can stop them there before they come to Italy, for example." And so that there is a framework of international law that supports the human right to leave conflict, to become a refugee, but it's being, what's a good word to use? It's being used to, or maybe changed or twisted, perhaps is maybe too hard of a word, to achieve the political goals, to stop the migration.
right,
Mm,
so the international body, especially UN or any international, even uh, international community, even individual country has to respect international law and to solve those crises, those people they run away, those exactly who are uh, uh, well found fear of persecution from the conflict, but just stopping uh, whoever running to Europe uh, at the Mediterranean border just to stop. It's not solving by undermining who are well found fear of persecution and running for their life. It's a very bad solution. How can you say?
Yes, I would say that you're correct. It does not solve the underlying issue generating the migrants. But I would say that the people, the governing coalitions that have these policies aren't so interested in solving the problems that generate these migrants. They're only interested in stopping the migrants because that's their problem. And so I understand that solving the problem at the source might be one policy direction to go, and it's possible that maybe perhaps European or maybe even American investment in the region could lead to a more stable, maybe take Sudan, for example, the European or American intervention in the conflict. But then I feel like there's little political appetite in Europe or the US to venture into, say, Sudan, and stop the conflict by force and follow it up with maybe like a Marshall Plan of Central Africa. It's not something that, in my view, would be politically feasible. It would be really difficult to generate the political capital for such a venture, I would guess. And so it's probably easier for them to stop the migrants than it would be to go to the source of the issues and solve it. And there's probably many more issues at the source than I could ever count on, ever count. It's a very complex
Yeah,
um,
I mean,
range of issues.
as part of international community, as part of human right norm and standard, whoever respect or abiding international law, they all created international law, human right law. They did it, and they should follow the law and more appropriate way and more respectful international law. But isn't the way European and those Mediterranean countries are dealing? It's a very bad way, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely generates a lot of instability in everywhere it's involved, this policy decision.
Right. The other thing, of course, everybody is not a refugee, as you said. They want to make more money or more some economic benefit to go to developed countries. So that can be not fit in the refugee laws. Developed country, Western country, they squeeze international monetary system and financial system for Western country advantage. And the whole other country was suffering by those system too.
I mean, of course, I think that there are a lot of shortcomings in Western countries, and there's a lot of things that you can't solve, and a lot of things maybe that could have gone better. I think that the U.S. and with its adventurous let's call it foreign policy in the Middle East, I think net in the end it generated a lot more chaos and instability than it ever solved. And I think it's really changed the way that Americans look at foreign policy and Americans see um, American action abroad. And so I think that you're right that there has been a lot of maybe meddling, let's call it, from the West that's resulted in a lot of negative outcomes. And I think that you'll see a change perhaps in Western foreign policy. And it might not be the change that these poorer countries want to see, but it might, might be less military intervention, might be less humanitarian aid. It seems to be the direction that we're heading.
More respect that way and more, uh, human rights norm and standard, international law. If they do according to international law, that would be much appropriate.
I'm not at liberty to say exactly how many refugees are still entering, but I understand that it's still possible to enter the U.S. As a legal immigrant or as a refugee. I imagine the scrutiny at the border is much more intense than in recent years, and whether the scrutiny is up to the level, the standard of international law is something that I don't have the answer to, but I would venture to guess that um, it's definitely, if not over the line in intensity, it's definitely close to what we would consider the the limit. But it's definitely decreased, I would say. But I couldn't say exactly how much. For example, my wife is an immigrant, and we just recently came to the U.S. in February, or she just recently came to the U.S. as an immigrant for the first time in February. We had no problems at the border, but the process takes lots of time, lots of money. And if you don't have either of those, I can definitely understand the the wish to circumvent that process.
So, how did you see the behavior of those recipient country, European or America? Uh, they recipient because of they have a mandate of international refugee law or international, I mean, human rights under UN system.
I would say that it's probably there's a threshold at which the because typically what happens is when like let's say a wave of refugees is generated by a conflict, let's say in Syria is a great example, and Germany opens its doors and says, let's take in 1 million Syrian immigrants. And by the way,
Right.
Turkey took in far more than Germany. I feel like Turkey doesn't get enough credit for taking in many millions more than Europe. But with Germany, we'll stick with Germany as an example. And so they bring in all of these refugees, and they're very organized. They want everybody to learn the language. They want everybody to have a place to live. But it's a difficult thing if you're a Syrian to move your family to live in Germany. It's a difficult thing. The first generation will not participate in the German economy to a way that they generate a surplus for what the German government put into them, like invested into them. Maybe their children, maybe their grandchildren could become but I don't know if they become German citizens or not, but it's maybe they could contribute to the German economy in that positive way. And but the regular person doesn't really see those numbers. The regular person sees my neighborhood is changing. Now there's a shisha bar in my local neighborhood. Now there's people that speak a language in Germany that I don't understand. And maybe you're in like a small town in Germany where the German government settled refugees. And so over time, it's a numbers thing. You'll reach this threshold at which the German society has to deal with uh, changing in a way that defining German could also be you're a Syrian refugee. And it's at a societal level, they're grappling with that. But at a political level, there are people that generate political capital by noticing the differences between, like, let's say, the Syrian refugees or other refugees and Germans and like traditional German society. And they'll run articles, look at what this person's did, look at this horrible thing that happened in France. Do you want this to happen in Germany? Like the Paris attacks in 2015, I think 2015, 2016 is a great example of, and so this political coalition, Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, they've kind of been built out of this with anti-immigrant sentiment at the roots, at the foundation of it. And it's quite a strong political foundation, unfortunately, and they generate a lot of political capital. And these are the kind of movements that can topple centrist coalitions in European countries, and it could lead to a dangerous situation. So if you're Macron, for example, the leader of a centrist coalition, you have to do something. You have to do something politically to placate this group so that they can't on this singular issue overcome your coalition that has these maybe varied interests. So I would say at first, people are generally quite open in the West to helping refugees, helping migrants, but over time, if it's unchecked and regular people feel as if they're being they're being put in second place over time, then it can generate these political movements that can topple the centrist coalitions, and that's the danger, I would say.
Right. Yes, it's true. I mean, you also said, most those recipient country are probably the main motive of their accepting immigrant is first economic benefit, because they need labor in Europe or in America. So they accept a lot of immigrants for labor. And second is a population, aging population. So they need young population and also children because they are all European or many those they they don't want to have children population, young population crisis and increasing aging population. So that solved by migration, a lot of them. So that is
Mhm.
basic. We can see the fact, the fact. And the other thing is that you also say um, political issue and those left wing are prefer like that in America. Most Catholic and like Latin America or Muslim. And also when they talk about border controlling, why they did not make very strongly, very effectively solution to prevent those drug dealer or those
Mhm,
murder criminal, you know, from
mhm,
many country gang. They never
mhm,
hit the right one, just
mhm,
hitting around the bush. This doesn't look like that.
mhm. I think it's one of the consequences of having an open society in general. I wouldn't say it's a negative thing, um, generally, and there's no perfect policy. It's a very difficult thing to manage millions of people coming and going into your country. And so if you want to have, let's say, zero, criminals, zero drug dealers enter your country, you really would have to drastically limit the number of people that come into your country. So like take a maybe China would be an example. I don't know enough about the Chinese border. I would have to get a visa as an American to go to China, and even then, I would be you'd have to, in order to accomplish this goal of we want zero criminal and only innocent people can come in, you would really have to limit the number of people total. In my this is just my opinion. You'd have to really limit the number of people, and that's something that I think in the West we don't want to live in a society like that. We want to live in a place where generally you can visit. If then we have a much wider range of countries that don't need visas to visit us. And generally in the US, if you're on the list, if you're in a country that's on the list that you need a visa, it's because they're concerned that many people in this country want to come to the US and stay permanently without getting a permanent visa. And that's been my experience with Europe as well, that generally you're allowed to visit. They have now these really quick, in the US, it's called ESTA. And then Europe, they'll have one if they don't have, I think they've recently added one in Europe where you can get a virtual visa waiver in 24 or 48 hours. And you can visit the country for 90 days as a tourist. It's a very strict definition of a visa. There are very few things you can do. Like I think technically opening your work laptop in the US on an ESTA would be highly illegal. But it's one of the features that comes with some issues of living in a more open society. And there are downsides. I totally agree with you that and innocent people do get stopped at the border or turned around, and drug dealers do get through. But I think on the whole, if you look at it, I think if you want to live in an open society, you have to live with the consequences of being in an open society. But there are definitely elements you have to balance, and you can't go too far on the border control side because you want the benefit of people visiting your country. You want tourists, you want new ideas, new cultures, and to experience that. But you want security. You want to control who's coming in, who's coming out. And maybe it's about money. Maybe it's about maybe things come, drugs, weapons, this and that. Um, and so there's always this balance. And I think the current trend in Western societies is to shift the balance more towards control. And whether that's a good thing or not, I don't have the omnipotence to know. I prefer personally, I'm of the opinion that the more open, free society and more open borders is generally the best. But I do understand the consequences of going too far in that direction. And what we're seeing now, it might be a rebalancing of those priorities in the West.
I don't know the protest. Do you have any idea what is the main reason of the protest? Is there any related to migrant issue or refugee issue? But I saw some Palestinian uh, issue were there or Palestinian protester were there. I don't know. Maybe you have any idea?
A bit, yes. So over the whole country, there was a series of protests this weekend, and somewhat inspired maybe by the attempt to have this like kind of military parade to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the army. So there's like the No Kings protest is what we would call it here. The one in California is directly related to the deportations that are going on currently. And so just to give some numbers so that we have some kind of clarity of like maybe the scale of the deportations. So Obama's first term, 1.6 million people were deported. Obama's second term, 1.5 million people were deported. Trump's first term, 1.2 million people were deported. And Biden's term, 683,000 people were deported. And so far in the Trump administration, we've seen between, I guess, over 200,000 at least. I don't know the date exactly about today, but over 200,000 have been deported. So it's quite a quick pace. But I think the real difference is Trump makes a bigger show of the deportations because it's important to him politically to make a show of it. And because of this kind of show, it's generated a lot of backlash, a lot of like the protests against him, for example. So I think part of the protests, because if you look at the polling, it seems that the majority of Americans agree with the deportations, but they did not like the deployment of the National Guard or the Marines to California. So that's kind of there's a couple things going on.
Trump case, uh, he is not doing secretly or silently. He openly announced and he openly uh, did it. I mean, it's people more they have a sensitive of feeling, I guess.
Yes.
So that more people sensitive. But in terms of factual analysis, even as you said, the Obama administration, he did deportation more than Trump, right?
So far, yes. Trump has a long way to go to catch Obama,
Right.
but we're
So
at the beginning of Trump's second term, so we will see.
nobody protests or nobody talk much about deportation under Obama. Or isn't that also politically motivated?
Mhm.
Probably those California, Los Angeles Democrat, uh,
Mhm.
domain area.
In the US, it is a very political, immigration is a very political thing here, I would say. So there's a couple things going on. Some people believe in the Democratic Party that if you bring in more immigrants, that will be more voters for your party in the future, and that's a pretty standard belief in that side. However, in the Republican side, there's also like there are big businesses that want this influx of immigration. They want the access to the cheaper labor, and so might also want to increase the number of immigrants. And so there's this kind of it just depends on what your constituency wants. If you're in Texas, maybe you might have a more anti-immigration stance, and if you're in California, you might have a more pro-immigration stance. But this is a really important thing. Uh, the U.S. is a very big country, and it's kind of like 50 countries sharing one federal government. And so immigration is one of these things that's really difficult, politically speaking, for us to solve. It's a very expensive like with political capital to have a federal immigration, I guess, overhaul, so to say. And if you're in Montana, if you're bordering because you're bordering Canada, you might have a different view of immigration than if you're in Arizona or Texas or New York. And so it's a really political capital intensive process, and the return might not be worth it. And so the US is we're in this position where it's really difficult to have immigration reforms, and our process is quite slow and clunky compared to other countries. And at the same time, both sides are politicize the process that it's kind of broken and isn't working to their own ends. So that's kind of where we're at.
See, as you said, 50 states in America is similar to the different small 50 countries with one federal government. Do you mean each state has its own immigration law or immigration regulation, or it isn't covered by federal government over all 50
Mhm.
states?
No, the 50 states share the immigration law. However, they have perhaps different interests in what they wish immigration law would look like. And so that's where the conflict comes. So, but we all share one United States immigration policy.
Uh, each mean each state also has a role for something to play immigration issue.
You could say, for example, like if you're in Texas, you have more things, maybe more that affects you. Texas deployed the National Guard to the border recently. I think I don't know if it was during the Biden administration or the early Trump. I think it was during the Biden administration. They deployed the National Guard to the border. And if you're in Kansas, you don't have as much control or power, so to say, over the border.
See. So what about in terms of asylum seeker or refugee application, each
Mhm.
state has any role or is state social welfare or a
Mhm.
kind of uh, sponsoring refugee? Is
Mhm.
there any different state have different policy, different capacity, or a little bit, or
Yes.
most are similar?
They have different capacities. So we'll take California and Texas are a good two to take here. So in California, they have places that are called the sanctuary cities, and I don't know exactly all of the details, like the legal details of what a sanctuary city means, but they're generally really open and friendly to people who have entered the U.S. Legally, illegally. They're not asking questions, so that would be like a sanctuary city. And Texas, like in recent years, has kind of the constituency, the people here have felt a bit overwhelmed by the number of migrants. And so that what they started doing was um, putting the migrants, maybe they've crossed illegally, on buses and sending them to other states. Florida, I think, started doing the same. So states like in the Northeast that don't typically see this kind of immigration as a way to protest the policy of the federal government that doesn't suit the constituency in Texas. And so there was a big fuss about that. So that's two different states, two different stories, two different views towards immigration.
I see. So it's mean each state or maybe two, three states, if they have any agreement or if they can make any arrangement, they can send your the slum seeker in your state to another state, which will be willing to accept or
Mhm.
agree to accept, then Texas can send them to other state. Such thing, you mean it's possible?
I don't know how legal it is or was, but that's what they did.
I see. So it means among each state can work together. It means some state may demand more in terms of labor or they have
Mhm.
more space or more capacity, so they were willing to accept that. I
Mhm.
then they can share or they can share the burdens or they can share.
Mhm.
I mean, whatever they want each other. It is something like it's possible, right?
That's a friendly way of putting it. It was a very more adversarial process, with the busing of migrants, I would say. It was more of like the sentiment was you're making us deal with them. How about you share them? And there was no asking. They just sent them. It wasn't a friendly exchange of migrants to share the burden. It was kind of a forced you need to you need to share this burden with us kind of sense.
I see.
I wish it was in the friendlier the friendlier way that you described, but unfortunately it wasn't.
Right. I see. But I don't know in United States, most of United States has most state are Christian dominated state, right? There are no other religion or other culture dominated state.
There are
And so
places that have large Muslim majorities, like cities, for example, like in Michigan, there are large communities of Muslims, for example. But yeah, you could definitely say that most states are Christian, and Utah, many Mormons as well.
I mean, it means some city, one or two maybe Muslim majority or
Mhm.
other religion majority probably. But overall, every state, you can say majority are Christian.
You could say yes. For the Hispanic community, mostly Catholic. I would say. And then
Right.
in like the I guess we call them WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, in that community, they're mostly Protestant. And then there's a large, like in the middle of the country, there's a large like German heritage group, and they're split, I would say. And then between Catholic and Protestant and all different branches of Protestantism. And so yeah, that's about the divide. So Hispanic people mostly Catholic, and then uh, Anglo-Saxon mostly Protestant.
Right. I mean, uh, used to be U.S. supposed to be Protestant origin, right? When during Dark Ages, they were run away from Europe, mainly to United States, most of Protestant. But how come when Roman Catholic I mean, following United States? Because at that time, Europe was Roman Catholic dominated. So uh, probably most Roman Catholic came to US because for economic reason.
You could say so. Big groups of Roman Catholics that have come to the U.S., the Irish, the Italians, there were some Germans as well, and they came a bit later in the country. And in classic tradition, American tradition, they were hazed a bit as they came in because they're different. They're Catholic. They trust in the Pope, and it was a belief that the Catholics would serve the Pope over the United States, so they couldn't be good immigrants. They're not really Americans. And so this was like at the time, this was a really important issue. But at the time, when these waves of immigrants came, and Hispanic people also, mostly Catholic, at the time, it was a very contentious subject to allow Catholics to immigrate to the US or the effects that it could potentially have.
Right. I mean, recently the American was elected as Pope, the first time.
Mhm.
So it means American is also influenced, I mean, Roman Catholic arena, even American. Can you say that's also a Catholic uh, arena?
There are, I would say there's a significant number of Catholics in the US. And I also point out that there's probably a lot of wealth concentrated in the Catholics in the US. And so it's a constituency that um, it's it's different, but it has its aspects that could be attractive to the organization. The Catholic Church is an organization. I don't know all what goes into choosing the Pope, but as an American, I'm happy to see that, our one of us made it. Now one of us is in the Vatican.
So how can you say American people welcome?
I would say for most, especially non-Catholics, it wouldn't be very important. It's just, oh, fun fact, by the way. But for Catholics, I would say it's quite significant. I don't know how significant, only time will tell, the effects and the changes and the actions of the specific Pope. But I think for the Catholic community in the United States, I think it's a significant event.
The Catholic community will welcome they have a Pope from America. But
Maybe.
I don't know the intention of Vatican, why they selected America because uh, Roman Catholic influence in many countries, many continents, but the one USA being so I mean they have Catholic, but they never seem like Catholic influence, or is there any intentions of Vatican uh, or they want to influence more American audience or American politics, even immigrant population? How can you say that? They have any intention? You have idea?
Uh, I have no idea. I have no idea. Um, Hmm. I imagine that they're always trying to expand their influence, and the United States is a place that you could look at and say, "Hey, maybe we could do better here." But I have no connection with anybody in the in the Vatican. But it's definitely a possibility. It's definitely a possibility.
right? Probably they want more influence of Catholic in America, probably. But uh, I don't know whether they can consider in the future the American will be Catholic dominant.
Mm. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. I think it's we will be quite Protestant for the
Right?
foreseeable future.
Because if Catholic influence America, it means there are no Protestant stronghold country, probably, because
Mm,
U.S. is the remaining Protestant stronghold, I guess. Other countries are not that stronghold because most European are mixed with Catholic, right? So,
correct.
so in America, but most Democrat, I think, they were also very much appreciated the Pope uh, in, from America because
Mm.
usually, can you say Democrat are most Catholic supported?
Yes. Yeah. They have a fair share. There's kind of two camps, I would say. The more liberal Catholics would tend to vote more Democrat, and then there are the Catholics that are like they're single issue voters, and their issue is abortion, and they vote more Republican because their only issue is abortion. So there's this kind of split politically in the American Catholic community about it.
So, so then that will be good things for um, uh, Democrat because they have a Pope in America, and now recent protests in California, Los Angeles, those Democrat stronghold. Is there any influence by Catholic?
I I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so.
And maybe most are immigrant. Can you say like that in Los Angeles protest, California protest?
Mhm. I don't know how many people with the protests were immigrants or not, but there's a significant Hispanic community in California, and I'm sure, turned out to the protests. And to the scale of the protests, I don't know the exact numbers, but I do understand that it was much smaller than the Black Lives Matter protests. It's not one of the largest protests ever, but it did make a lot of noise. And I would assume that the protests reflect what the community looks like and, the people in Los Angeles. Um, but I don't think religion played a big part in this protest.
But maybe not religion, Catholic play the
Mhm.
protest, but the background of the population, maybe probably Catholic
Mm.
majority, I guess. And
Mhm.
then you said not just California, the protests held across the country around 50 states. Why other states also protested?
Mhm. So a lot of the other states protested, and the protest happened on this last Saturday. It was called a No King's Day, was the moniker, the title for this counter protest. And the protest was more about people. It was kind of like warning, I guess, Donald Trump that, hey, we don't like military parades. It's not something culturally we've ever done. We don't like this authoritarian unilateral action from the president, and we didn't like the deployment of National Guards. And when I say we, I don't really include myself. I wasn't out protesting, but that was kind of the sentiment behind this No Kings protest. This kind of anti-authoritarian, anti military parade, anti-deployment of National Guard to Los Angeles. That was kind of the sentiment.
So the military parade is the first time it was never been in America. Why people are suddenly, they don't
Mhm.
like it.
It's I couldn't really my guess as to why people don't like it is it's something that we would associate with like, oh, Russia does that. Oh, North Korea does that. Oh, China does it. For us, it's a very even it's not necessarily true even because like France does it as well. But it's something that we associate with authoritarian regimes.
I
In like in our so when we see it when we see the president trying to have us do it, and I don't know what the president's intentions were. It might be just, hey, it would be great to celebrate our troops on the 250th anniversary of the army with the parade, but to Americans it just seems like that sounds expensive. We don't do that. what's the real what's the real purpose? So
see. So I know American is people oriented. You never see soldier in the city or in the popular area. Unlike that, many authoritarian countries, usually authoritarian country, they rule the soldier rule the country. They
mm,
are everywhere in the public arena. But American, unlike that, it's come protest first in Los Angeles, California, or the military parade come first.
oh, the protests in California were before the military parade. Hmm.
Then it's clear the military parade is not the main reason of protest. It's additional
Hmm.
protest it can be.
I would agree. Yeah.
So the main reason protest in California is because deportation. So many probably immigrant, as you said, Spanish and Palestinian and many other
Hmm.
were
Yeah.
involved. I know, and many probably Democrat can be also, they may not directly, but indirectly, those Democrat strong
Hmm.
area, we can say like.
Yeah, and to kind of maybe add some context to the Palestinian thing. So I would say that the Palestinian cause has become part of the protest culture in the like in left-leaning protests in the United States. So I would venture to guess that anytime you see a large protest that's mostly left wing, you'll see Palestinian symbols. You'll see that cause represented. It's become part of their culture to protest for them.
So, by the way, you said the king, no king. Why
Yes.
they want to mention no king?
Mhm. So it's actually, I think there's a lot of clever political labeling behind this slogan. So the United States was founded as a revolution against a king. And it's maybe part of the strategy of the Democratic Party to kind of rebrand, to kind of have a new identity that instead of talking about how bad the United States is and like instead of burning flags, maybe we can take the flag, the American flag back and it can be a symbol of our political platform. Instead of having an anti-American platform, we will become the American platform. And so that would mean putting the Republican Party in opposition to that. Like we're the Americans, we want freedom. They want a king. They want an authoritarian leader. They're not very American. And so that's maybe part of the strategy to, in their words, reclaim the flag. And so I would say it's a um, political slogan that has maybe some hints of a possible future strategy for that party.
But so far, but it's not clear if there is a king like UK,
Hmm.
that makes sense. You protest no king, which means that makes sense. People want to stop the monarchy system, but US no any monarchy
Hmm.
system itself. But if you say no king, it's not made sense.
Yeah.
And you cannot you cannot remove Trump because he is elected by people. So that's also not possible. You
Mhm.
have any idea the Trump government policy on refugees? Refugee is
Mhm.
legally binding. Well-found fear of persecution should be protected by any country. immigration can be not necessary. In that definition, whoever want to travel or just visit or just tourist and study, whatever traveler, it can be
Mhm.
immigrants. But refugee cases, they need special protection.
So first, I guess we can talk about what does the process look like, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about what we might expect to see from the Trump administration in terms of what they do about it. So let's say if you want to claim asylum in the United States, you're supposed to go to a port of entry, so an airport or an official crossing at the border, and then you say the magic words and you claim asylum, and then your case will be processed by the United States Immigration and Customs Services, so USCIS, I think is the acronym of it. And so they take about 6 months to process your case, and in which time I think you're allowed to stay in the United States. And you'll either get an affirmative, you'll either, if this is the affirmative process, and if they accept you, you will have asylum. But if they deny you, then your case will go to the defensive category of asylum seeking. So then your case will be before a judge, and that could take years, in which time you're allowed to live in the US. So there was a huge spike in refugee or asylum seekers in the United States in 2023. So there were 456,000 affirmative applications. So for this first part of the process, 488,000 defensive applications for the second part of the process. So some of these might be the same people. And then in that same year, um, only 22,000 were given asylum in the affirmative process, and 32,000 were given asylum in the defensive process. So what that means is there are many cases backed up in the system because our system, yeah. And so in the meantime, everybody that's applied is kind of just here waiting, uh,
Right.
theoretically. And so uh, that's kind of the situation the Trump administration is coming into. And I I don't know how much power they have to really affect it. And the three largest countries that these asylum seekers are coming from, Venezuela, Cuba, Colombia. Those are the three largest groups. And so I would I would probably guess that they will have a harder policy. Like maybe they would want to shorten the time it takes to process these cases.
I also advocate for a lot of human rights issues,
Mhm.
and those including refugee and those political activists and other activists, human rights activists. So that's, I also concerned about the American current policy. But you said even though Trump a new government, it is not much suddenly change all this regulation or refugee policy used to be in America, right? So the thing is, as you said, maybe the refugee application process, maybe they may handle different way. Probably they can
Mhm.
handle more fast process, or they can more selective process, or as you said, everybody are applying, uh,
Mhm.
without necessary fit for refugee category, as a well-founded fear of prosecution. As you said, big country, Colombia, Venezuela, they are more maybe gang or drug dealer. They are more famous on that issue, but not unlike the military conflict in Burma, or like
Mhm.
Ukraine war, or some war
Mhm.
war-torn country that may be different issue. I mean,
Mhm.
those conflict country and war-torn country are more. significant well-founded fear of prosecution in according to refugee category.
Yes. And I think your analysis, I think, is correct. Cuba is also in there, and I think you're right. And I would say in Central and South America, it's bad governance, and I guess you could say the drug war. That because the real, I guess, issue is the amount of illegal substances that the American market consumes, and it's created this chain of, I guess, large cartels that dominated by the Mexican cartels that have kind of overtaken every single government between the United States and the source of the product. And it's generated not exactly, they're not war-torn countries, but there's definitely a lot of instability. And then there's Venezuela and Cuba. It's kind of separate from this, and they have their own kind of isolated authoritarian regimes. And so you're correct. You're totally correct that they're very different categories of asylum seeker or refugee. Um,
Right. So that is one issue that I mean that they can draw policy based on the origin of country, where
mm,
the real situation, real foundation of those country can be do more research on those
mm,
country. And the other thing is that they can uh, classify those very significant uh, potential refugee country. They can identify, I mean, they can
mhm,
identify those potential refugee countries because you may see many those even who say no conflict or even they say good governments or peaceful governments, peaceful country. Many come and apply refugee. It
mhm,
doesn't make sense. So that in that case, that I mean, the policy they can draw more effectively, so they can identify those war-torn and more significant uh, potential refugee countries. And then as US has the right, they can squeeze more and identify more Protestant from war-torn country, allow easily Protestant,
mm,
those persecuted Christian. I mean that
mm,
they can do. Then we can realize Trump policy made more uh, American interest
mhm.
or his support, however, we realize.
The Trump administration, like 4 weeks ago, they did revoke some protective status for people from Venezuela and from Cuba. And so I think there was about 500,000 people that were potentially impacted by this decision, and the Supreme Court allowed it temporarily. So it's kind of it opens the door for them to be deported as well. And so as you see ICE kind of move from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agency, as you see them kind of move throughout the country, when they get to Florida, I would expect a large fight because there's so many Cubans there, and it's a Republican stronghold. And the Cubans vote Republican, so it's Trump's party. So I would be curious to see what they do exactly there. But that's one thing that they have done as far as like asylum seekers and refugees are concerned, is they have revoked the status. And they also encouraged South Africans, like the white South Africans, they encouraged like the white South Africans to apply, but at the same time they would revoke status from the Venezuelans and the Cubans. And so it may be an unfortunate preference that they have, but I think it's an accurate assessment.
Right. Probably what you said may be true. And I mean, it's his backbone is Protestant. We can say like that. I mean, that is
Mhm,
his backbone, whether black or white, but
mhm.
his backbone is Protestant. Even many Democrat white, they don't support Trump. So
Correct.
half of white, support Trump. It's not necessary always the white immigrant will be supported. No, but probably the Protestant background will be more hopeful for Republican and those conservative Trump supporter
Mhm.
because they are able to claim more about origin of America and the power of Republican.
I can see that. I can see that. I'm trying to think of a place that, like a war-torn country that has a significant Protestant population.
Right.
Um, yeah. Ukraine is Orthodox. I say maybe old-fashioned Protestant, and if you stretch maybe the definition. Um, hmm. There's quite a few Vietnamese, but then it's an older category of people that immigrated to the US, I would say. But there's quite a few Baptists that are Vietnamese as well, I would say. But it's an older group. It's not a modern group of asylum seekers.
Burma, there are three, four states are Protestant Christian state. So Burma is
Okay.
a war-torn country.
Yeah, it does make sense. And if you share a religion, it's much easier to integrate into the larger country. So it is definitely something that maybe they would consider. It's tough to know.
Because Democrat will not, they will never do like that. And
Right.
that is Trump capacity. I mean, Burmese case is the fight between democracy and authoritarian, you know. So
Mm,
that's military authoritarian. They destroy the country, the whole country. Uh, there are many democracy fighter and many supporter. Even previous government was democratic government. They coup and they throw away democracy system. So that is the case in Burma. And Burma, there are, as I said, three, four state Christian Christian state, Christian state. They were also persecuted. So those military are mostly Buddhist background, and they persecuted more Christian
mhm,
because Christian different from Buddhist too, so they can easily persecute it. Easy those Christians were suffering. So that is the case in Burma. That's a Burmese background, and last Trump election also a lot of Burmese Protestant Christian in America they voted. Last year we made news breaking news.
mhm,
I mean analysis on this shooting case, and
mhm,
I was the first on social media. We have a group of discussion,
mhm,
and we said about that time nobody read to talk about who support who.
mhm,
Everybody afraid, that time very tension, Harris and Biden and Trump. So and shooting happened and people scare more American, they scare, So
mhm,
we prayed. I said Trump will how Trump will win. He will be on the way to White House. We have
mhm,
a good discussion. So that is the first time we break, we have a podcast. So
mhm,
that was the first time. Last year we did correctly. That
mhm,
time Biden came also very strong. The shooting
mhm,
made very sensitive, the
mhm,
white guy, there's young boys shooting in there's a lot of meaningful. So Trump is hopeless at the time,
mhm.
And you can
And
imagine the white guy shoot him, the young guy shoots. So there is no hope for because Trump, if he based only on white race, he
mhm.
will not win.
Correct, correct. And he's done a lot to win Hispanic and Black voters as well, more than other previous Republican. presidents.
Right.
But something I will say about this previous American election is I was really disappointed that the Democratic Party chose not to have a primary and instead again to crown somebody. This is a problem that I think they have. They're very much they make a decision in the back room and then they try to have this illusion of choice for their party. So, for example, Joe Biden, the way that Joe Biden was chosen as well, the way that Hillary Clinton was chosen before him. And so and Obama beat Hillary Clinton. He was not supposed to be the president. They tried to beat Obama, but he was so charismatic and so popular, they had no choice. And so I think it's a problem that they will have, and they will continue to lose to the Republican Party if they can't let their voters choose a candidate. I think it's something that they'll have to really consider if they ever want to win another presidential election.
I mean, it's a lot of, up and down and unexpected president election and expectation and what's reality are always different in many cases. So,
Hmm.
and Trump case, even not just the shooting issue within Republican also, at the time, Trump was Trump has no friends, a lot of his own Republican previous president or
Hmm.
a lot of high level, I mean, leaders used to be a lot of it surrounding him. He has no support at the time,
Hmm.
Even he could not able to compete in within the party,
Hmm.
He just came from outside the party, He did not raise president election within the party.
Correct.
He is running by his own outside the party, and then at the final stage, he entered to the party convention. So in that way, he came up last president election. So it means
Hmm.
very even Trump may not expect that he will win,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think he will expect that because there is no hope at the time.
Hmm.
And shooting was happening and the white young shooting and so it means his base is totally lost if he based
Hmm.
on the white population.
Hmm.
Luckily his only chance for winning is those Protestant Christian background.
Hmm.
They they feel the Democrats are not helpful for the Protestant population, and I mean Democrats are so close with the Roman Catholic and Muslim, So it means
Hmm.
Protestant no chance. I mean they have only option to go with Republican and Trump,
Hmm.
and with social media also break and supporting Trump continuously. That
Hmm.
what Trump has able to gain his position again in a short period, I guess.
Hmm. It's an interesting thought. I think I'll have to incorporate more of like you were saying, like more Protestantism or maybe religion-based thinking into my analysis of this kind of these situations. I think it's useful, I think.
But I mean, I'm just discussing about previous Trump election case, But later
Hmm.
on, there can be a lot of podcasting or social media spreading news,
Hmm.
The important thing is first time to break the news,
Yeah, it's very true. It's very
Right.
true.
That's social media power, I guess, the first time. And people can also change their mindset or their feeling, thinking within a few days or a few weeks, right?
Yeah, and sometimes some people never change their thinking. It's just depends. There's some, but yeah, you can definitely change someone's mind, especially if you're like you said, if you're first, you can kind of set the tone for the discussion going forward as well. That's another factor in being first. So if people accuse him of not being humanitarian or this or that, and then here's a way that he can improve his political chances by importing more voters or refugees that would vote for him, and at the same time looking good, I think that that's probably with him specifically. I think that's the maybe a strategy that could work, and it's not a guarantee, nothing, of course, but it's making a big media splash that gives him the advantage if he goes with this policy decision to allow more Burmese asylum seekers. That would be my advice.
That's
He's Christian. It was quite a large win. It was a large win this last election.
right.
They both parties have their own strategies, and both have had different levels of success in different places. But it's the one that, as far as immigration goes, that they both have different interests, maybe with because maybe a Democrat and a Republican would both want a Hispanic migrant, but for different reasons. The Democrat would want them to vote for them, and the Republican would want them to work for their business. Um, this kind of situation.
At the time, you can make benefit such inviting more Christian refugees.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a big public battle between the Trump administration and the UN over an issue like immigration or asylum seeking and refugees.